Hey, welcome back to whatever this is, and today we're back with another Civ 6 guide video, this time about what to do and how to master the first 50 turns of your game. This is something that I see a lot of people talking about and really curious about how to get better at the start, because the start of your Civ game is so important to the late game, so I thought I'd make a little guide about it. Before we get into it though, if you like Civ, I sometimes stream it over on Twitch at twitch.tv/stormtargaryen. Come through, join our Discord. I have links to my stream in the Discord in the description of this video. I'd love to have you. It's a fun time. But anyway, let's get straight into this. So when you're playing Civ and you're starting out your game, the first thing you need to do, of course, is pick a good capital and settle a good capital. Now, a lot of the times, this will just mean settling in place. Settling in place is usually not a bad option. The game is going to put you in a decent spot, but what you can do to really improve and maximize your tiles is really think about where you are putting your capital. So for example here, we're playing Tamiris. This isn't the greatest start of all time, but it's pretty solid. We have some good growth tiles, we have some good production here, but if we were to settle in place, this wouldn't be that great. One thing to keep in mind whenever you're settling is that no matter where you settle, you can settle on the worst tile in the history of ever. No matter what, as long as you settle a city, it will be 2 food, 1 production. So if I settle here, this will turn this tile into 2 food, 1 production instead of 1 food, 1 production. But if I were to settle over here on where this warrior is, I would be 2 food, 1 production, and 2 gold, which is a lot better. Now, I'm crossing the river, so that would mean I would have to take away my first turn to do that, but I think it's worth it given the current setup we have here. I am going to scout with my warrior first, and you want to get maximum movement from this and see as much as you can with your warrior just to see if there's a better settle out there. I'm pretty convinced we're going to settle on this maze here, but let me just see. Yeah, not much over there, but some more production, so I think it justifies. We're going to go ahead and move here, click next turn, and then boom. Capital settled, easy peasy. The thing to keep in mind with this is this doesn't work for every single tile. You have to keep in mind of what is on it. So for example, you may say, oh, Storm, with the logic you just said, why don't you settle here on this woods tile? Because then it'll be 2 food, 2 production. But if you settle on tiles that have features on them like jungle, like woods, marsh, etc., if you settle on that, it'll get rid of those resources. But if you settle on a bonus resource like maze, deer, etc., or like stone, those will get absorbed into your capital. And as you can see, you know, we've got 2 food, 1 production, 2 gold here. So keep that in mind. If you can, a lot of times you don't want to settle on woods or jungle, but sometimes you do. It just depends on the situation. Next up, and this is the biggest, most important piece of information you could take from this video. If you're going to take anything away from this, remember this. The number one thing you want to do in the early game of Civ 6, no matter what difficulty you're on, is you want to focus on food and production to start the game. In previous Civ games, things like science and whatnot were king. That's absolutely what you wanted to focus on. You wanted to beeline. But in Civ 6, you really, really, really need food and production. So you want to do everything you can to get the most of that. So for example, my capital here, we're decent on gold, decent on production, but we don't have a lot of food. So you're going to want to change your game plan depending on what land you have. And that's also just a big tip in general, is focus on what you have, or maximize what you have. So for example, I have good growth tiles here and here, but I need to grow out to them and I need to get a builder to improve those for it to be worth anything. So in a situation like this, a lot of people will tell you to start the game, you always want to go scout, and a settler, or you always want to go slinger, warrior, settler, or slinger, settler. Or like, there's like, people will claim there's like only 1 or 2 strategies you do. I am a firm believer, no matter what difficulty you're on. Again, I'm someone that I play on everything. I've been playing a lot of deity recently, getting a lot of wins on deity. You need to maximize your land. So in a state like this, I would prioritize getting a builder pretty quickly. Not, of course, first, but you know, I would change my game plan because I don't have very good growth. And that's the biggest thing. You need food, you need production. We have good production with this hill tile here and this hill tile here. We just need to get these 2 growth tiles. So in a situation like this, I would try and get a builder pretty quick. Now, I touched on it a little bit earlier, but when it comes to early build order, that's also a big question I hear a lot about Civ, is what to build first. Again, generally, the main things you're going to hear people tell you are doing 2 scouts into a settler, a scout, slinger, settler, or even sometimes scout settler or slinger settler. There's a lot of good options. All of those are fine and dandy. All I would say is just prioritize what you think you need to start. But generally, if you don't know what to do, going 2 scouts is always a good option. Even in this start, where I said I'm trying to get a builder, I'm still going to go scout first, because I do want to see what else is out there. And as you guys know, Civ 6 is a game where you want to be settling as much as possible, so seeing the most land and seeing where to go is only going to help you. So those are some things to be thinking of right when you start. The next big tip I can give you is you want to be swapping out your policy cards as much as you can, depending on what you need. This is something I didn't really do when I first started, because I was like, oh, okay, well, if I swap out a card for a turn or two, how much value am I really getting from that? And it turns out quite a bit. And just to break it down, the way this game works is once you finish researching a specific civic, let's say Code of Laws, we get that done in 6 turns, I will be able to swap out my policy cards however I want to. So every time you finish a civic, you can swap out your cards for free. If you want to do it when you haven't finished a civic, you have to pay for it, which in the early game isn't that bad, but you want to be spending your gold on other things. So basically, every time you finish a civic, you want to check, see if there's something you can swap out. So with that said, here are some of the early cards you want to be focusing on. Of course, God King, first one. Pretty much every single game you play, you're going to want to put God King in. It gets you your Pantheon. Pantheons are incredibly strong, and I already made a guide video on that. Shameless plug if you want to see that. But God King is pretty much always going to be your first economic slot that you put in. As far as military slots, either one of these would be good. If you went double scout, survey is great. But if you have barbs you find immediately, discipline is usually going to be the one you put in. Next after that, some other cards to prioritize. If you're a naval civ, of course, maritime industries is very strong. Just straight up double production on boats is amazing, especially if you're playing someone like Norway or like Phoenicia, who gets really strong boats. This is an amazing card. Next card you want to focus on, depending on your start, is a Gogi. Getting just straight up 50% production towards melee, anti-cav, and range is super strong. If you're playing a civ that gets that can pump out units really early, or you're playing like Montezuma, who has a very strong early game unit, and you just want to rush someone really quickly, or if you're having barb problems, you need to defend yourself, a Gogi is a great card to go for. Highly recommend this one. From there, in the second wave of cards, it really depends on what you're trying to do, but all of them give you general value. If you have a lot of horses, you're playing like a Tamiris or someone that has stronger horses, rushing for maneuver is a great idea. Again, 50% production straight towards horses, that's amazing. If you want to get a governor title and you want to start getting your governors in, state workforce and early empire are both great for that. Generally, a lot of people are going to tell you to go for early empire solely for this card right here, colonization. 50% production towards settlers, that's amazing. Again, you want to be getting as many settlers out as you can. It's just blindly rushing this is not always going to be the best strategy for you, because let's say, you know, you start rushing for this, you're going for settlers, you're building settlers, you have 2 settlers ready to go, and a bunch of barb horsemen show up, and you can't move them, and now you desperately need units, and you're wasting all these turns just sitting there. It's a nightmare. So this is always going to be a good card for you, but just make sure you're in the right spot to start building them. But again, to touch on what I said before, what you're going to want to be doing is, as you are researching these civics, swapping out the cards for what you need. So for example, if you spawn near barbs, throw in a Gogi, start making some military units, boom, you build an archer, you build a slinger, whatever, and then you finish early empire, and you're like, okay, I have the units, I have protection, boom, let's start getting some settlers out. And you finish mysticism, and you're like, okay, I've gotten those down, I really want a religion, let me throw in revelation and get more great profit points, etc., etc. You just keep doing this, keep swapping things out as much as you can to maximize the value that you're getting from your cards. You don't want to be in a situation where you look at the turn timer and it's turn 50 and you've had God King in the entire time and you've had a Pantheon for 30 turns and you've just been wasting your cards. Just try and maximize your cards as much as you can. The next tip I can give you, and this is something that took me a long time to start doing, is don't be afraid to chop and harvest your resources. There are going to be a lot of games where you have a ton of rainforest, you have a ton of woods, you have a ton of marsh, and they're just sitting there. They're not very good tiles. You're wasting them. Just don't be afraid to, like, for this tile here, chop that woods out, put a mine on it, boom. You're getting the same amount of stuff, but you just built a settler in half the time. especially when you combine this with Magnus. This governor here, just placing him in your city, will give you 50% yields from harvest and feature removals like chopping. This is fantastic in the early game. If you want to throw Magnus in there, chop a few things out, chop a few settlers out, chop a few legions, or like whatever civ you're playing. Chopping and harvesting is extremely important. I cannot recommend more than chopping and harvesting more in your games. Of course, do be aware of your land. In a situation like this, in my capital, I don't have a ton of production, so I might want to keep this woods around here, whereas I can chop this one because it's on a hill, so I can replace that production. So don't go too crazy with the chopping. Definitely make sure you have enough resources to sustain your city, but don't be afraid to chop things, especially when it comes to the next thing, which is district placement. One thing that'll separate a newer player to a very strong player is someone that can really get the most out of their district adjacency and their district values. This is something that just comes with time. You just have to look up the districts, know what adjacencies they have. For example, commercial hubs get +2 for being on rivers, or campuses get +1 for being next to mountains. Definitely take the time, go in your Civilopedia up here, look up whatever district you want, and definitely just read up on what the adjacencies are. You'll find them all right here, and get used to what they do. Because again, a huge benefit to you is once you start learning how to combine these and get bigger and bigger adjacencies. So I'm gonna take some time here and figure out what would be a good example to show you. Give me 1 second. Okay, this isn't really the best example, but just something like this, right? Putting your districts together, harbor, commercial hub, campus, you know, government plaza, you put them all together, they all have adjacencies that benefit off of each other, and now you're getting +6, +7, you know, stuff like that, right? Again, this isn't the best example, but you can really, in a better, this isn't, you know, I don't really have the best setup here, but when you have more room, more stuff to play with, you can really get some crazy adjacencies, especially if you combine that with playing Japan or someone that already gives you more bonuses to putting your districts together. This will really, really, really help you. Because now, in a situation like this, if I put in the card that gives me double adjacencies for commercial hubs, now instead of just giving, you know, your normal +2, +3 from that, I'm getting +14 gold from that pretty early on. That's really strong. Doing that with different adjacencies like your campuses, you know, things like that will help you a ton. It just takes some time learning what boosts what, and will just come with practice. But even a situation like this, again, going back on what I said before, don't be afraid to harvest things. I know a lot of people that are new to Civ that are like, look, this would be a great place for a campus, but there's a wheat tile here. I don't want to get rid of that wheat tile. Sometimes you gotta do what you gotta do to make your city better. So speaking of making your city better, this is a very, very important tip if you're someone that likes to settle on wonders and things. Pay attention to your city citizens. You can see this by clicking on this Man Citizens button here on the bottom right of your city. And essentially what this is telling you is since the city only has one population, its one worker is working this tile here. That's kind of fine. We don't have a lot of good options here because even though there's 2 people here, I only get 1 population from the city and I get 1 from the city settling. You're going to want to switch this out depending on what you're trying to do. So for example, once I start working these wheat tiles, if I end up working them, I want to work those as opposed to this because I want to grow my cities. So you can come in here, you can click on whatever tile you have, and you can manually swap over what your city is working. This is going to be really important if you're settling on a wonder, because what the game likes to do is just prioritize wonder tiles. So you may notice if you settle on something like the Delicate Arch, or things like that that don't give you food or production, you could be like, wow, I have a city on a wonder and it's at 1 population and can't build anything. Like, what's going on here? That's because you need to focus on growing your cities and giving them production, which goes back to what we talked about earlier. Managing your citizens is a huge part of that. Again, this just takes time to learn what tiles you should be prioritizing. But at the very least, if you don't want to think about that, Civ has a way to simplify that. On the bottom right here, you have all of your yields that the city is giving you. You can click on any of these and tell your city to focus it, and you can do that for multiple things. So, like I was saying, early game, food and production is really important. You can say, hey, I want the city to focus on food and production, and now it'll always prioritize those 2 tiles. And you could do that for any amount or any least amount, whatever. If you click on it a second time, it'll not focus on something. So let's say you settled on a natural wonder that you don't want to focus on yet, that's giving you like culture and faith or something, you can double click on the culture, double click on the faith, and it will not work any tiles that have that. So definitely take a look at this, play around with this in your own cities. It is a very, very, very helpful tool. So last but not least, let's go into what text you should be focusing on early on. Again, this is another thing that is very situational. That's the lesson of this video, is that Civ is a very situational game. There are a couple texts that are going to be really strong early on that are very easy to boost that I think are worth looking at here. So outside of your normal first 3 texts that you're just always going to have to get for every game, some things to focus on are sailing. If you are a coastal Civ, again, getting your boats out really quickly is going to be really important to scout the land and potentially, like, you know, steal a city state or war a Civ really early if you have really strong boats. Sailing is really good. It's very easy to boost. All you have to do is settle a city on the coast. If you're playing coastal Civ, you're probably going to settle on the coast anyway. So sailing is great to focus on early. Archery is really strong to focus on early as well. All you need is animal husbandry. And to boost this, all you need to do is kill something with a slinger. So that's why a lot of Civ content creators are going to tell you, hey, build a slinger early so you can kill a barbarian with a slinger, get the archery boost, and then upgrade your slinger into an archer, and now you have a very strong early game unit. And plus, archery is just going to be very important as you go up in the difficulty, because you know, once you get to deity in the higher difficulties, the AI loves to just attack you for no reason at the start of the game. So being able to defend yourself is very, very important. Of course, astrology is very strong as well. If you're playing a religious Civ, you really, really need to get your holy site down early so that you can get those great profit points and get to getting a religion. The only problem with astrology is the way to boost it is by finding a natural wonder, which you don't really have control over, unfortunately. But astrology can be really strong to go for early. Bronze working is a great one to go for early. Finding iron is super strong. Swordsmen are very strong in this game. But the main thing about bronze worker that I personally really like is being able to chop rainforest. Because if you're going for a Magnus start and you want to chop out some settlers, it is really annoying when you have a lot of rainforest and you can't do anything with it. So getting to bronze working and being able to chop that rainforest is incredibly important. And, you know, some other early game techs, of course, horsemen are always going to be incredibly strong in Civ. Being super fast and super strong, of course, is going to be a great thing. So if you want to early war somebody and you're playing someone like Damaris or Simone or someone that has some really good early war benefits, especially when it comes to horsemen, rushing out horsemen is always a good idea. Only thing you have to do to boost it is building a pasture. And of course, if you're rushing horsemen, you probably have pastures in your lands anyway, so it's very easy to boost. And yeah, again, as far as early things to go for, it really depends on your start. It will change what you want. Let's say you want to war someone early and they put walls up. You're going to want to get masonry so you can get a battering ram early, so you don't have to worry about building siege units. Or let's say you have all of your luxury resources are things that have plantations and you really want that extra gold and you want to take the pantheon that gives you culture for plantations. Maybe you rush irrigation, put some farms down, boom, you get that really early. Let's say you want to go for Edamantonki and you have a bunch of floodplains. Rush writing, try and get some scouts out, find another Civ, boom, you boost writing, and now you can go for this. It just all depends on your situation, which again is the big takeaway from this video. Civ is such a situational game. And I know I would love to give you just a general, hey, always do this in your game, always do that in your game. But for the most part, the only thing that you can say that with is food and production. Everything else is going to be a game-to-game basis, and Civ is all about adapting and learning and adjusting to what the game gives you. So that is my somewhat guide, and more like tips and tricks on what to do on your first 50 turns and how to master them. Again, it just takes some time. If you want any more guide videos, let me know. I'd totally be down to make some more if there's specific topics you guys are looking for. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you want to, subscribe, like the video, or don't. It's a free country. And yeah, come check me out on Twitch, and I'll see you guys later.